Joy Behar calls her a 10. I mean, how dare she objectify a woman with a sexist rating system, but it's such a typical thing from a 1.5.
Well said.
The motives stink worse than Joy Behar's jog bra. I mean, assuming she jogs. Oh, wait, there she is. All right. She has a point. Maybe I am obsessed, but some people are obsessed with Bigfoot, and they don't get to see him on TV every afternoon. And if they did, could they tell the two apart? I don't know.
Joy Behar didn't get dragged. She got dismantled quietly, surgically, and without even showing up. While she was off rehearsing another moral lecture, Gutfeld and Tyrus turned her legacy into leftovers. No screaming match. No live face-off, just cold comedy with sniper precision. For the first time, The View became the punchline, and Joy, just background noise to a takedown she never saw coming. This wasn't debate, this was demolition, and it aired without her name ever being spoken.
Joy Behar accused Elon Musk of being pro-apartheid, but then begged him afterwards not to sue. Musk lawyers have yet to comment because they're still checking to see if it's legal to sue a cow.
Shots fired.
Just a legal question. I don't know why it's so upsetting. I don't make the rules in this country. All right.
Greg stayed perfectly calm, his voice steady and unraised, almost disarmingly so. There was no need for him to shout or slam the table to get his point across. Instead, with a subtle arch of his eyebrows, he conveyed a world of amusement, sharp wit, and a knowing confidence that suggested he was completely in control of the situation. His sarcasm was delivered like a surgeon's precise incision, each jab carefully crafted and executed with measured intent. These weren't just offhand comments, they were meticulously placed blows, designed to chip away at Joy's trademark, arrogance and inflated sense of self. Every sarcastic remark landed with the weight of undeniable truth, gradually stripping away the protective layers of smugness that she had built around herself over the years. As Greg leaned into his role as the composed yet cutting commentator, the effect was palpable. Joy, once the unshakable queen of daytime TV banter, started to visibly falter. The confident facade she wore like armor began to crack, and the cracks spread fast. It was as if with every sarcastic swing from Greg, a thread in her carefully woven identity unraveled, leaving her exposed and vulnerable before the live audience and millions of viewers at home. There was a subtle shift in the room's energy, a shift from lighthearted sparring to a tense, almost electric atmosphere charged with the thrill of watching a seasoned comedian dismantle an opponent without ever raising his voice. Then there was Tyrus, the embodiment of cool and collected. He was the steady counterbalance to Greg's surgical sarcasm. Tyrus didn't need to match Greg's verbal flourishes with volume or overt drama. Instead, his presence alone was enough to elevate the entire scene. Calm as ever, barely flinching, he leaned back with an effortless swagger, his expression unreadable but undeniably intense. When he spoke, his words hit with the precision of a sharpshooter brief. Brutal one-liners that struck directly at the heart of Joy's reputation, dismantling her credibility with a quiet but undeniable force. Tyrus's delivery was so smooth, so controlled, it was almost like watching an expert marksman at work. Each line was fired off with the intent of hitting a specific target, a flaw in Joy's persona, a misstep in her public image, or an inconsistency in her arguments. The audience could almost feel the impact of each verbal bullet as it tore through her carefully constructed reputation, leaving visible damage in its wake. Unlike the loud and chaotic shouting matches typical of daytime talk shows, this was a refined form of destruction, precise, elegant, and devastatingly effective. Together, Greg and Tyrus created a dynamic that was far more than just friendly banter or casual teasing. What unfolded wasn't a typical exchange of quips and comebacks. It was a carefully choreographed comedic takedown, a performance of wit and timing that left no room for error. Their synergy was undeniable, a dance of words and expressions that alternated between razor-sharp sarcasm and cold, deadpan humor. Greg's smirks and eyebrow raises set the tone, while Tyrus's piercing glances and succinct punchlines delivered the knockout blows. Watching this unfold was like witnessing a masterclass in verbal jousting. There was an artistry to the way Greg and Tyrus deconstructed Joy's bravado, exposing the weaknesses in her arguments and the hollowness behind her confident exterior. They weren't just tearing down a public figure. They were unraveling a persona that had become a symbol of outdated, performative outrage. The scene was as educational as it was entertaining, an exercise in how to wield humor and sarcasm as tools for truth-telling and cultural critique. What made the exchange all the more compelling was the contrast between the two men's styles. Greg was the calm, almost amused provocateur, delivering his lines with a knowing smile and a raised eyebrow that suggested he was enjoying the intellectual upper hand. Tyrus, on the other hand, was the stoic enforcer, his dry delivery and piercing gaze serving as a silent but powerful rebuttal to any attempt by Joy to regain footing. This balance of levity and intensity kept the audience hooked, creating a tension that built steadily with each passing moment. The entire episode felt like a masterstroke of comedic timing and strategic dismantling. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most effective way to bring down a towering figure isn't with loud confrontations or angry outbursts, but with calm, calculated humor that cuts deeper than any shouted insult ever could. Greg and Tyrus demonstrated that mastery of language, tone, and presence could achieve what so many fiery debates fail to do: reveal the truth, strip away pretense, and leave the audience both entertained and enlightened. In the end, the exchange wasn't just about Joy's unraveling. It was a reflection of a larger cultural moment, a shift away from bombastic, performative outrage toward a more nuanced, incisive form of critique that values wit, precision, and subtlety. Greg and Tyrus didn't just win the moment. They redefined what winning looks like in a world saturated with noise and spectacle. So, as the cameras rolled and the audience watched in rapt attention, Greg's calm demeanor and raised eyebrows, paired with Tyrus's cool, devastating one-liners, worked in perfect harmony. They didn't just take down a personality. They delivered a lesson in how humor and intelligence can expose the cracks beneath the surface and change the conversation entirely. And through it all, Joy sat there no longer the unshakable queen but a figure slowly unraveling under the steady, unrelenting pressure of sharp, intelligent comedy.
It's not even that. In The View, you don't need to find Trumpers. You need to fire your race baiters.
Yeah.
You need to fire the two races. You've had people. You had a McCain on there. You've had people on there before, and you ran them off. Mm-hmm. So the racist ones who want to stick to this, Whoopi and Sonny, and the, was it Bette Midler? What's her name? Yeah, broke-ass Bette Midler. Fire them and bring people in. Maybe you could get McCain to come back. She was a Republican, but every show and every break, she was nearly in tears because she...
Live on air. Tyrus didn't need to raise his voice one bit. There was no frantic yelling or desperate shouting, no attempts to overpower the moment with volume. Instead, his words landed with the weight and force of heavy slabs of concrete, unyielding, and utterly undeniable. Each punchline struck fast and hard, hammering away at the facade Joy had long worn with apparent ease. There was a cold precision to his delivery, as if he were wielding a verbal sledgehammer, demolishing carefully constructed defenses, one blow at a time. This was not just casual comedy. It was a calculated strike, a measured barrage designed to dismantle and expose. On the other side, Greg Gutfeld's contributions cut through the noise like a razor blade slicing through thick fog, not blunt or reckless, but sharp and deliberate. His verbal jabs didn't merely graze the surface. They sliced clean through the dense, impenetrable veil of self-importance Joy had draped around herself for years. It was a veil thickened by years of untouchability, a protective cloak woven from her long-standing perch atop the precarious throne of daytime television. For far too long, Joy had occupied that seat, isolated within her own echo chamber, immune to challenge or critique, shielded by an audience conditioned to clap on command rather than question critically. But all of that changed in this moment. This was the ambush she never saw coming, the sudden strike that caught her completely off guard. There were no dramatics, no viral explosions on social media, no outraged headlines clamoring for attention. Instead, what unfolded was something far more subtle, yet infinitely more devastating. A precise comedic onslaught wielded with sniper-like accuracy. It wasn't a battle of volume or outrage. It was a surgical mission of exposure and dismantling. With a mastery honed through years of sharp wit and timing, Gutfeld and Tyrus tore apart the hollow, laughter and fragile narratives that had become the foundation of Joy is a public persona. Their sarcasm was surgical, dissecting every weak point, exposing every crack beneath the polished surface. Gutfeld's timing was impeccable, so precise, in fact, that it could shatter glass. Each mocking comment delivered with the kind of practiced ease that only comes from relentless rehearsal in some underground comedy dojo where the stakes are high and the bar is set even higher. Meanwhile, Tyrus maintained his cool composure, an island of calm amid the growing storm. He watched Joy's unraveling with the detached satisfaction of a connoisseur savoring a finely brewed espresso, slow, deliberate, and deeply appreciative of the nuances in her discomfort. There was no rush, no eagerness to force the collapse. Instead, he let the moment breathe, allowing her dignity to erode naturally under the weight of their combined verbal assault. And then, quite suddenly, the laughter stopped, not the audience's, but Joy's own. The jokes, which had once bounced off her with little consequence, now turned inward, landing squarely on her own fragile ego. The applause, once constant and affirming, faded into an eerie silence. When the laughter dies down and the clapping ceases, the throne that seems so lofty and secure begins to wobble, revealing its instability for all to see. This was no mere television segment. It was a public demolition, raw and unfiltered, a reckoning long overdue. There was no shouting match, no chaotic clash of voices in a heated studio showdown where Joy could raise her voice and drown out her critics with sheer volume. This was something far more effective, a silent execution carried out with wit, timing, and cold precision. And the cruelest, most cutting detail, Joy wasn't even in the room when it happened. She was absent, oblivious to the fact that her empire was being methodically dismantled right before the eyes of millions, adding insult to injury. This very week, Joy Behar made headlines for accusing Elon Musk of being poor, a baffling term no one seems to understand, but then, almost immediately, begged him not to sue over the comment. The legal team representing Musk remains tight-lipped, likely still consulting dictionaries and lawyers to determine if suing a cow is even a feasible legal action. Shots were fired, but instead of a fiery battle, this was more a quiet legal question hanging in the air, adding a layer of absurdity to the unfolding saga. Throughout this entire spectacle, Greg Gutfeld didn't need to utter a single name. His descriptions and jabs painted a picture so vivid and unmistakable that everyone knew exactly who he was targeting. The image he crafted was crystal clear: the loud, self-important daytime host perched atop her throne of moral superiority, wine glass in hand, acting as if she possessed the pulse of the people, while likely never even having pumped her own gas. It was a character recognizable to anyone familiar with daytime talk television, the archetype of performative outrage wrapped in a cloak of sanctimony. Gutfeld's approach was masterful. He didn't resort to shouting or throwing wild accusations. Instead, his weapon was humor-sharp, precise, and mercilessly effective. Each punchline was a scalpel, carefully removing layers of pretense and exposing the rot beneath. The foundation of his attack was satire, dressed up in biting comedy that made the audience both laugh and think. It was humor with teeth, and unyielding. And then, there was Tyrus, playing the role of the cold-blooded closer with perfect restraint. No theatrics, no flashy rebuttals, just a calm, unflinching stare that seemed to pierce right through the screen and ask the audience, "Are we really still letting this woman talk?" His delivery was icy, intentional, and devastating. The silence between his words carried more weight than any shouted insult could, while Joy continues spinning her wheels in front of a preconditioned audience that claps on command like trained seals. Gutfeld and Tyrus operate on an entirely different level. Calm, methodical, and strategic, they dismantle her entire act without even inviting her to the table. This wasn't random shade or careless mockery. It was a calculated strike, a comedy segment masquerading as a hit piece, meticulously constructed, brick by brick, to expose the illusion of influence she maintained. By the end of the segment, the message was unmistakable. The throne upon which Joy sat was far more fragile than anyone had realized. It was a reminder that influence built on performative outrage and echo chambers is vulnerable to those armed with wit, precision, and the courage to expose the truth quietly but relentlessly. The entire episode became more than a mere television moment. It became a cultural statement about the shifting tides in media and public discourse. Loud outrage and grandstanding no longer guarantee untouchable status. Instead, subtle, surgical humor that cuts through the noise is becoming the new power play. In this new arena, Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus are the masters, proving that sometimes, the quietest voices deliver the loudest truths. Exactly who was in the crosshairs? The loud, self-important daytime host perched on a velvet throne, wineglass in hand, pretending to hold the pulse of the people while probably never even pumping her own gas. Sound familiar? If that's not Joy Behar to the letter, then gravity itself must be a myth. Gutfeld didn't hold back but delivered every line with surgical precision, no yelling, just sharp punchlines that cut deep. He built his case with satire, wrapped in humor, making sure everyone watching felt the sting without needing an introduction. Then came Tyrus, the cold-blooded closer note theatrics. No extra noise, just an icy stare into the camera. Silently asking America, "Are you really still letting this woman talk?" His delivery was deliberate and devastating. No raised voice required, the silence between his words was enough. While Joy spins her wheels before an audience trained to clap on cue. Tyrus and Gutfeld operate on a different level, calmly and methodically dismantling her entire act without ever inviting her to respond. This wasn't random shade. It was a calculated strike, a comedy segment masquerading as a hit piece. Brick by brick exposing the illusion of influence. By the end, it was clear. The throne Joy sat on was more fragile than anyone realized.
Talks about you all the time.
Who is he? Well, really, who is he?
I don't watch the show.
He has a show.
I don't watch the
never
show.
heard of him.
Yeah.
I guess he's just obsessed with me.
No. Next, Joy's going to say she's never heard of carbs. Seriously, her denial of knowing me is as believable as her red hair. But obsession? I mean, come on, Joy. Where would you even get that idea? Like Joy Behar's face, it's looking worse and worse by the day. More full of crap than Joy Behar after a night of scotch and Taco Bell. Her being named Joy is like me being named ugly. Joy wasn't there on the show. Apparently Mondays are her days off when she feeds in the pasture. It now smells like a humid day inside Joy Behar.
Joy Behar wasn't trending because of some explosive comment she made. No, she was trending because two guys quietly laughed her into irrelevance, all while she wasn't even paying attention. Yet somehow, she remained the central figure, even without being present. Let's rewind and unpack what's really going on here. Joy's career has been a blooper reel of half-hearted outrage, off-target hot takes, and opinions so out of touch they make sci-fi seem plausible. She's like that one person at a party, who hijacks every conversation with an unsolicited TED Talk on world affairs, mispronouncing half the country names and mangling facts like she read them off a cereal box. She lives inside a bubble of certainty, speaking in absolutes, demanding applause like it's her lifeline. Without that noise, she might just collapse. That's exactly where Greg Gutfeld flipped the script. He didn't shout back, throw shade, or get heated. Instead, he smiled, raised an eyebrow, and let the comedy do the heavy lifting. No yelling, no political rants, just cold, precise humor, dismantling an entire persona, piece by piece. This wasn't a battle. It was a wrecking ball, disguised as a punchline. Meanwhile, Joy keeps thinking she's leading the charge, like a band leader on a sinking ship. The water's rising, the crowd's long gone, and she's still conducting, as if the show must go on. That's denial at its finest. Gutfeld and Tyrus didn't need to confront her directly. They simply turned the camera on, pointed it at the chaos, and let viewers draw their own conclusions. When asked about Gutfeld, Joy claimed not to watch his show, a denial as believable as her own red hair. But obsession? Please, if anyone's obsessed, it's him, or at least that's how she wants to spin it. Joy's presence on the show is less main event and more background noise. Apparently, Mondays are her day off when she's feeding in the pasture because her impact these days is about as fresh as stale air. The View, once a platform for daytime conversation, has devolved into a political drama stage, with hosts performing emotional outbursts and ear-roll contests rather than debates. Gutfeld watches all this from the sidelines, coffee in hand, shaking his head at how the show remains on air. Then, with effortless precision, he launches a comedic grenade that explodes the illusion of The View's moral authority. He's not just mocking Joy, he's dismantling her entire act, armed with understatement, a smirk, a pause, a raised eyebrow. Tyrus plays the quiet storm, where Joy needs a cheering squad and background music to land her points. He nails it with half a sentence and a look that says, "Are you seriously still saying that?" His silence is the loudest rebuttal. Joy preaches with the confidence of a professor but delivers facts like someone who slept through civics class. She wins the crowd with noise, not wit, feeding off ideological loyalty rather than genuine laughter. Meanwhile, Gutfeld and Tyrus operate on a higher plane where real humor sneaks up and lands. With surgical precision, Joy's been drowning in applause for so long she confused it for truth. But Gutfeld didn't storm the stage. He stayed cool and collected, letting the comedy speak for itself while she waved from her imaginary throne. Convinced she still rules the room. This wasn't just a takedown of one woman. It was an indictment of an entire system of performance, masquerading as insight. The message: Joy Behar's reign is over, but she hasn't gotten the memo. The audience laughs at her, not with her. People are tuning out scripted outrage and switching to sharp, effortless satire. Gutfeld and Tyrus roast the whole system with fewer words and more bite. Their power lies not in volume but in precision, calm and letting Joy's act crumble under its own weight. No shouting, no arguments. Just bold contrast, turning Joy into a caricature of herself. She didn't make the guest list for the real show. While she waited for fireworks, Gutfeld and Tyrus quietly finished the job. Slow roasting her legacy like forgotten leftovers. They didn't need her in the ring. They laughed around her. That's what made it sting the most. Now, her throne is just a shaky stool propped up by reruns and fading applause, a stage set for cleanup.